Yeah, this is the poster. This is the poster. Where's my so this, I went to the wrong side. This is the poster for it. And basically what it's about is this guy, John Demjanjuk. And John here, his original name was Ivan. John was caught in the 80s and was accused of being Ivan the Terrible of Treblinka. So this guy was alleged to be basically one of the cruelest people who's ever existed. Like this is the guy that was at the camps and reveled in it. Okay. Horrible person, if he is who they said he was. The problem is that there's a lot of doubt as to whether or not he was who they said that he was, because it was all based on this card, this identity card. And the documentary goes through the trial back in the 80s, where they tried to figure out if he was actually Ivan the Terrible. And so they did all sorts of cross-examinations. They looked at, of course, the original cards, and they extradited him from Cleveland, Ohio, where he had been living, to Israel, where they held the trial. And that's what this is, the trial in Israel. And it's absolutely just a crazy, insane story. He was convicted of basically being an accessory to murder in 28,000 cases. But then he was acquitted by the Israeli Supreme Court because they found out that there were a bunch of like mixed up messages and things. So like the picture on the ID card has 2 staple holes in it, even though there aren't staple holes on the back side of the card, which means that this picture was taken from somewhere else and then attached to it. So they think that the card was probably a Soviet forgery. And so he basically got off and was released back to the US. But in the process of all of this, they figured out that he pretty much without a doubt was a guard at Sobibor, which is what this picture is. I think they say this is him at Sobibor back in like 43, 44. And so they found a picture that they think is him as a young man dressed as a guard fully. He also had like the SS tattoo under his arm for blood type. And he said that he just like got that because he thought it would be a good idea in case he was injured. But like nobody's getting an SS tattoo. Like just, I thought it was a good idea, man. You know, why are you getting on my case about it? Well, so Ivan the Terrible, there's 2 versions of it. It's like, it's a different kind of Ivan. I'm scared. Well, let me go here. I'm scared to just Google a picture or Google Ivan the Terrible because I'm worried they're going to show. No, Google, I'm not talking to you. I'm worried they're going to show like the concentration camp and stuff. And I don't, yeah, welcome back to the stream. Goodbye. Immediately. Where's the picture of me? So one of the reasons that he was able to get off in the, where is it? One of the reasons that his appeal was granted by the Israeli Supreme Court is because further documents came out that showed the actual Ivan the Terrible of Treblinka was likely killed in 1943 in a prison uprising, and also that he had a different name and his last name wasn't Demjanjuk. The question is, though, Demjanjuk, apparently his mother's maiden name was the same as the name printed on the card for the actual Ivan the Terrible, which is really confusing because then that suggests, yeah, this is the guy. This is the guy that they think was reportedly actually Ivan the Terrible. So he's a young guy, a young kid, but this guy, like, I can't go into too much detail but he stood at the doors of the chambers with a sword. And as people were being shuffled in, like he was poking, prodding, stabbing, slashing at women, children, like total psychopath. No regard for human life or anything, and a sadist too, because he got pleasure out of inflicting all of this on people. So naturally, when the Soviets come out, they're like, well, we found him. We know where he is. He's living in Cleveland, Ohio, and it has been working at the Ford auto plant. Naturally, people got very upset and were like, yeah, get this guy. What most likely is the case, though, all of this aside, so he was basically given, or he got off in the 1992, I want to say 2 or 3 is when his appeal was granted. He was released back to the U.S. 93. Yeah, July 29th, 1993. The Israeli Supreme Court overturned the guilty verdict on appeal. They upheld the lower court's rulings on the authenticity of the Traniki card, which is the card that has his face on it, and the falsity of Demjanjuk's alibi, but ruled that reasonable doubt existed that Demjanjuk was actually Ivan the Terrible. So they said, in effect, this card is real. So he was an SS guard. He was lying about where he was at the end of the war and what he had been doing for the last few years, which is true. Like, there are multiple times where he was caught in lies, where he said that he, like on his initial immigration card to come to the US, he said that he had been at Sobibor. He didn't say he was at a camp. He just said that he was in the town of Sobibor. But then during this whole trial, he said that that wasn't true and he was never at Sobibor. And so he's caught in a lie. So there's a bunch of other stuff where they say, like, okay, well, he's caught in lies. He was lying about where he was in the last few years of the war, which you only do if you're doing something you don't want people to know you're doing. More than likely, after he was recruited by the Russians and captured by the Germans, he then was basically enlisted instead of just being a POW, and he was sent to work at these camps just to survive. But the whole point of the trial is that sort of argument where I was just following orders, you can't tolerate that excuse, because they call them the ground or the foot soldiers of genocide. Like, if you look the other way with people like this, then the people who do the dirty work get away. And you have to have zero tolerance for all of it, because the only way that this could have stopped is if people like Demjanjuk stood up and said, no, we're not doing this. We're not doing this. But he didn't. He went along with it. So he got off. Nobody. Nice. 10 months. Hello, long time no see. Hope baby and mama are doing well and life is good. Life is good. Baby's doing great. Mama's doing great. He is a little bundle of joy. Thanks so much. I'm glad to see you again, my friend. It's good to see you. But yeah, this guy, like, he got off because they said there's reasonable doubt that he's Ivan the Terrible, because we have pictures of this other kid that everybody agrees is Ivan the Terrible. And this kid doesn't look like this guy. They look very different. This guy and this guy are different. I don't think that's controversial. So there's reasonable doubt. But he was definitely a guard. And he definitely has been lying for a long time about what he was doing and where he was doing it. So a few years pass. Israel says they're not going to try him again because there's no way he'll get a fair trial in Israel, which I think is actually true and fair. The defense attorney for Demjanjuk, let me see if they have a profile for him. It's like Sheftel, something like that. Sheftel. This guy, yes, I remembered his name. I'm so glad. This guy, again, they go through this in the Netflix documentary. He is a force of nature, like one of the most eccentric people you'll ever meet. He wrote a book on the case too, but he was like the only lawyer in all of Israel who would take the case trying to defend Demjanjuk. And he was basically ostracized. Like in Israel, for you to go and defend somebody who's accused of being a Nazi, that doesn't work. Doesn't work. So like he was attacked with, I forget what it was, some sort of chemical agent. That's kind of funny actually. He was attacked with a chemical agent because by another Israeli when he came out of a press conference, and it blinded him in his left eye. So like he can't see out of his left eye because somebody tried to blind him as a result of him defending this guy or trying to give him a fair defense. Which his defense, he was just trying to say this guy's not Ivan the Terrible, which is probably true. He probably wasn't Ivan the Terrible. Ivan the Terrible probably died in a prison uprising in 1943. But he was a guard, and he did deserve to face punishment for what he had done. But yeah, they refused to prosecute it because they said that there wouldn't be that he wouldn't receive a fair trial. And there were other accounts, like 21 guards who the Soviet Union captured after the war, who said that Demjanjuk wasn't Ivan the Terrible, and it was this other kid with different colored eyes and a different shaped face. And bear in mind, these 21 guards would have no reason to lie about this stuff because right after they gave this account, they were shot. So like it's not like they were being promised forgiveness if they gave them what they wanted. One described Ivan the Terrible as having brown hair, hazel eyes, and a large scar down his back. Demjanjuk was blonde with grayish blue eyes and no scar. And this information had been hidden from the defense in the original trial. So they were like, just none of this makes sense. None of this works. So he was sent back to Cleveland, Ohio, and lived out another 20 years. And then in like 2003, I think it was, his citizenship was revoked again, or 2002. They took away his citizenship again because they're like, listen, you were a guard. We just can't prove you're Ivan the Terrible. And so they took it away, and they contacted a bunch of different countries to see if anybody would try him, because the U.S. couldn't do it because he hadn't done anything against U.S. citizens or against or like in the jurisdiction of a U.S. territory. So the U.S. couldn't do anything with him, but they didn't want him. And eventually Germany, who had for decades kind of dragged their feet on these cases, Germany finally said, okay, we will we'll take the case. And so they deported him in May of 2009. He showed up, and then he went on trial in Munich, was convicted, and died shortly thereafter of basically old age. He was in like a nursing home in the trial. But because he had an appeal that was pending, he was presumed innocent during the appeal. So still on the books in Germany, he's considered innocent, which is just crazy. But the case, the documentary goes into a ton of detail on it. And I actually got a book about the case by one of the people who's featured in it. And it's just a fascinating case because it brings up questions of like, how do you prosecute major atrocities and crimes? How do you even begin to handle that? And at what point do you look at somebody as like, you're 90 years old, you did something in the middle of a terrible war to survive, at least is your argument. At what point do we just kind of bury the hatchet? At what point do we just accept that that was in the past, or there's no way to really know for sure what happened? And it's interesting because it handles all of those topics. And I think at the end of the day, the clearest conclusion you can reach is that he was a young guy. All through his life, he just did what it took to survive and make it. He survived through the great famines in Eastern Europe in 1932 and 33. He just did whatever he had to do. And then, the world fell apart in World War II. He's presented with this option of like hard labor or go and be a guard at these camps everybody keeps talking about. He decides to become a guard, and then he never left and never said anything and spent an entire lifetime trying to cover up what he had done. So it's fascinating, but it's a absolutely crazy case. Absolutely insane. Just when you think you figured everything out, it gets even more insane. My one criticism of the documentary is that they leave you wondering if he was actually guilty of anything or if it honestly was just a total case of mistaken identity. But like one thing outlined in the book, without a doubt, like he was a guard and he lied about a lot of stuff, which you only do if you have something to hide. If I say, where were you last Saturday? And you say, well, I was at the store all day. But I know that that's not true because I looked at the cameras and you never showed up at that store. So you're lying and you're hiding something. Now, does that something mean that you're guilty of the thing I'm questioning you about? Not necessarily. So like with Demjanjuk, where were you in 1943, 44, 45? I was just a farmer, and then I was a POW, and then I came to America after the war. Okay, well, we know that you weren't a farmer, and we know you were in these other places you say you aren't in. And so does that mean that he's necessarily guilty of the thing you're accusing him of being a guard at Treblinka? Well, not necessarily. He could be, and that could be why he's covering it up. Or it could be that he's covering something else up. But it's all about degrees, right? If the thing in question is like the worst thing you could do, in this case being a guard at a death camp, what are you trying to hide that would be worse than that? If you were like, well, yeah, I was a deserter. Okay, that's better than this. So just tell us that. But the fact that he never said what he was doing and came clean shows that probably the worst was the truth. And so it's fascinating. The documentary is called The Devil Next Door. And it's really, really well done. Really well done. Highly recommend it. And the book is called The Wrong Right Man, or The Right Wrong Man. Wrong Right Man. The Right Wrong Man. Yeah, The Right Wrong Man is the name of the book. It was like a New York Times Editor's Choice award-winning book. Like it's really well done, and it's pretty cheap too. It's like $10, but it's a big read, and it gets into all the nitty-gritty of the political elements of the case. It's just really, really well done. So I thoroughly recommend it. Super, super interesting. But like these are the cases that I find fascinating that aren't just interesting cases where you aren't sure if they're guilty or innocent, but also that raise larger questions. Like if a crime was committed in a country that no longer exists against people that of course can't testify against him, and it's also decades further back, and there's no direct evidence or eyewitness testimony that can be relied upon, how do you pursue a fair trial against that person? Or does that even matter? Like, it kind of brings up the question of, is it better for 100 innocent men to rot in prison if you catch one guilty? Or is it better for the one guilty man to go free? And so if you cast this wide net, is it possible that he wasn't guilty of these things? Well, in his case, he almost certainly, but that's the thing, almost certainly. Is there a situation where maybe he just like said all these lies as he was trying to immigrate to the US and was trying to navigate the post-war era, where he just said so many things that weren't true that there's no way of deciphering it now? Yeah, it's possible. But still, like, It's just fascinating.